Hello, I am not a younger version of Mel McGinnis. I am Garrett Kane, but I am filling in for Mel McGinnis. Rather, he has let me hijack his solo sessions of Sophie Scholl for the time until I come up with my own idea for my own solo show. Here I am. Today, I want to talk about a subject that has to do with our counties and our local communities in New York State, especially rural New York. I'm afraid we have an addiction problem. And I can hear you now. Oh boy, here goes Garrett on the drug war thing again. No, our addiction is to government, specifically government funding in the form of tax money and tax incentives. And like most addicts, or many addicts, as long as the supply is good and the funds are there to afford the drug, the addict can function fairly well on the surface, regardless of what's going on inside. But it takes just a bit of a disruption in the supply to cause all that functioning to fall apart. And we have certainly had a disruption in the supply of tax money recently due to the COVID crisis. Regardless of what you think of the virus and its dangers or its nature or how it's been treated, it has certainly caused an impact on business, on lives and livelihoods, and thus revenue. So the business shutdowns that were mandated by the state government results in lost revenue in the form of taxes, as well as the unemployment, which reduces less money for consumer spending. Tourism is down because people are afraid to travel, and we are in an area that relies heavily on tourism for the collection of sales and bed taxes. And as a libertarian, I'm not a fan of most taxes, but taxes like sales taxes and use taxes that come with people who are willing to buy certain items and thus pay those taxes are some of the least harmful ones in my opinion. That said, that money is down. So we are likely to have, if not already in the midst of a budget crisis at both the county and local levels. So how do you deal with an addiction? The first step is admitting that you have a problem. And here I am, and hopefully the rest of you will hear this and realize that this is a problem. So why is this a problem? Well, since we are reliant on state and federal money to support our services, such as our police and emergency services, a lot of our businesses are subsidized via tax breaks through the Industrial Development Program. Well, what that does is it leaves us a lack of leverage. And I've heard people say in Chautauqua County that realize that our situation isn't that serious. Why don't we just get back to work? Why don't our county officials just say to our business owners, go ahead and open up. Open the gyms, open the malls, open the churches. Well, it's because the state holds the stick of funding over our head. And our sheriff's department, specifically Jim Quattrone, has felt that in a passive-aggressive way already. The criminal justice and policing reforms that came down as knee-jerk mandates from Albany are being threatened to the county sheriff's department as a way of withholding their funding if they do not comply and implement these reforms. I give credit to our sheriff, Jim Quattrone, for trying to stand up to this. Although the resolution is yet to be seen, and I worry that if we get in a place where it's either we defy those orders or the funding's withheld, neither outcome will be good in our current situation. So what do we need to do? I think besides admitting we have a problem, we need to change. We need to find ways, and not just in our law enforcement and an emergency service program. In fact, I think those are the places that we should keep the funding levels about where they're at now, and maybe find some ways to replace government funding with local funding or volunteer funding. So the question of any addict who realizes they have a problem is how to quit. And there's usually two options. There's cold turkey and there's gradual cessation. Now, I don't think we're going to be able to, as a county, quit cold turkey. It's just our addiction's too strong, our dependence is too strong. So let's assume we're going to go the route of gradual cessation. So in this route, you want to deal with the most pressing issues or damages being caused in your life by your addiction first, and work your way backwards. So how can we make up for these budget shortfalls? That leaves our county and local officials with a very tough problem to solve. And as I see it, there's two general directions we can go on this. We can either raise property taxes and or sales taxes, or we can cut spending. Or I guess we could do a combination of both. Let me address raising property taxes first. We have more and more each year a service economy and a real estate economy. And I feel like this area is poised for a boom in both real estate sales as well as the service or vacation sector. We're even seeing it now. I know people who have short-term rentals, Airbnbs, VRBOs, and they've been full with people who are coming from big cities like Buffalo and New York City to get away from these areas of high COVID numbers. But I think this could translate over time, especially now that a lot of people have gotten used to working from home. Businesses have gotten used to their employees working from home. Those people are going to seek out permanent residencies in places like Chautauqua and Cattaraugus County. Now, we want that to happen. That would be a great financial boom to us, but I think we need to be careful in that we don't solve this budget shortfall problem with putting it on increased property taxes or increased sales taxes, but especially property taxes, because that in essence raises the cost of living, raises the cost of being a resident in our county. And the reality is that the Pennsylvania border is literally minutes away from us, and we have to compete with that cost. So I think we need to be careful about going the route of raising sale taxes. Now I want to mention in this, there is a program that is run throughout the state, but counties have the choice of whether they participate in it, and we've been participating in it in decades, and it's called Economic Development Program, or IDA, which is Industrial Development Agency of Chautauqua County. Now, basically this program gives tax breaks on property taxes, sometimes to zero, sometimes what they call payment in lieu of taxes, which is basically a lower tax rate, which gradually may increase over time. Now you might say, why is a libertarian about to criticize tax breaks for industry? Aren't you libertarians for lower taxes? Well, yes, we are for lower taxes in general, but what these taxes are, or these tax breaks, are in essence regressive tax increases on the residents. The last report for our IDA, or our overall statewide program, was conducted in 2017 through the Comptroller's Office. So they're a few years behind. But in 2017, for that year, our IDA budget in Chautauqua County was $13 million. Now keep in mind that our overall tax levy, our overall budget for the county, is right around $60 to $64 million. So that is $10 million or $13 million that you are not requiring your industry and your businesses to pay, but yet with the same amount of services, those taxes go on the back of your residents in the form of property taxes. Now, if we were to come up with a program similar to the IDA for residents to dodge their property taxes, even for a period of time, I might be willing to compromise. But what this is it's basically corporate welfare. It's central planning. It's a tenet of socialist progressivism where government manipulates the market in offering tax incentives to some businesses, while other businesses that they don't view as bigger or big enough creators are assessed and taxed just like the residents of the county. So I know this is another thing that we probably can't cut cold turkey, but seeing that despite this program, we still have businesses like Caselli Cheese, Trucklight, a lot of the businesses that used to exist on Allen Street, these incentives run out and they leave. So on the other side, people in favor of this are going to argue that if we do not have these programs, we're going to lose our industry. I think that's hypothetical. I don't think there's enough evidence to say that that would definitely happen. But then you're shifting this to the taxpayers. I think if we make the businesses pay their fair share and lighten the tax burden on our residents, they will spend more money, which will lead to more sales tax revenue, and they'll be incentivized to stay here. And if you lower your property taxes or keep them stable, that's more incentive for people who are trying to get out of a city that was recently a COVID hotspot to come here and settle, to raise their families, and support our local economy long term. So that's my idea on property taxes, that we should be cautious about going that route to make up our budget shortfalls. So let me touch on cutting spending. And you'll hear from a lot of our county officials about cutting spending, that so much of it is mandated by the state in terms of unfunded mandates. A lot of that's Social Security, Medicare, and I understand that. But I also see some things that the county does that I don't feel as a conservative, as a libertarian, is really the lane or the role of government, and they end up being very costly. One of the things that we have in our county is 2 airports, and one of them is more of just an airfield, and we haven't had a viable commercial service there in almost a decade, and even when we did, it wasn't really affordable, it wasn't really reliable, yet we spend almost $1 million annually in county funding to keep these airports up, to keep them running. And I've asked the question, for who? Who's using them? Well, people who own private planes, people who are executives of the industries that we bribe with the IDA programs to come in to visit their businesses. Well, this is all just an extension of the IDA program, so you can roll that $1 million into the $13 million that we already spend on the IDA program. So Garrett, what's your solution to this? Well, the airports are certainly a valuable asset, and if you look at our location geographically in terms of the Northeast and the Great Lakes, I think we could put it on the market to someone like Amazon, to someone like FedEx, a private company who can use it to generate tax revenue for our community versus it being a tax sink. We can still keep the facilities open for those individuals who come in on their private planes or otherwise use it, but they have to enter into an agreement with the entity that buys that in the private sector. So right there, that frees up about $1 million from the county budget. And besides the $1 million that the county spends, there's usually an ebb and flow of federal grants and federal aid. And just a side note here, it kind of amazes me that whenever our U.S. Senator or Congressman announces that they've secured a federal grant for funding in the airport, everybody celebrates and throws up their hands in the air and says, oh, yes, good, great. Well, that money, it came from hard-working fellow Americans. The government does not produce anything. So the government does not have anything to give to anyone that it doesn't take from someone else. So we should be cautious when we see those grants roll in and think about who is paying for that, because someone is. It's not just a big pile of money sitting in the Federal Reserve. Although they do tend to create that money, eventually someone's going to have to pay for either that money in the moment or that debt down the line. And that's probably going to be our children and grandchildren. Where else do I see an opportunity for us to cut spending? Social services as well as health and human services. And let me preface this by saying there are some wonderful people working in the employment of the county in social services, in health and human services, and I respect them, and I know their heart is in the right place, but they are unfortunately good people working in an inefficient government system. It's inefficient because It is run by the CSEA, which is a giant statewide civil service labor union, which is based in Albany and run by progressive elites. And every 3 or 4 years, this union negotiates with our legislator for higher and higher wages, higher and higher benefits for not only those folks, but everyone who works for the county. And that burdens us as taxpayers when we could likely turn these services over back to either the charitable sector or the nonprofit sector, or even during our country's first 100 years, who took care of social services? Who took care of orphans and widows and sick and homeless? It was the church. It was the faith community. And we've gradually let government take that from us. Now, we need to be ready to take that back on as Christians and members of the faith community. So, getting over an addiction is a struggle, and it takes work. And we need to try and replace government with community. Because if we just take the government services out and don't replace it with community or with charitable organizations in the private social sector, those people are going to be left hanging, and we don't want that. As much as people get, or libertarians and conservatives get blamed for being heartless, I'm conscious of that. I know other people who are conservatives are not cold-hearted. They're conscious of that, and we're ready. There's other organizations, the VFW, the American Legion, the Lions Club, the Rotary. They can all step up to provide services like addiction counseling, housing assistance, home repair, battered women, delinquent youth. It's going to take some work to rebuild that infrastructure in the faith community, in the private sector, but I think we can do it, and I think we need to do it, because we need to break this addiction to government taking care of us and put it back on us and put it back onto our communities. One last thing, we have a lot of municipalities in this county too, and I think they're going to struggle in the same way that the counties do, if not worse. And we need to look at the same type of strategies for replacing government with community. And I see that happening in a lot of ways that our local fire companies do, but making it more frequent, making it more promoted and more well attended. And of course, there's always going to be that negative attitude that people won't show up, people won't give. Well, until you give them a chance, until you express to them that there is that need there, and now this is on them and not the government, I think they will show up for things like the gala days, like the benefit chicken barbecues, or the raffles, or the cleanups, or the fair booths, to where the fire company or the youth service group is holding a fundraiser. So think about that. I'm not a huge Michael Jackson fan, but one of his lyrics sticks in my head in all this. I'm talking to the man in the mirror. We have to talk to the man in the mirror and see how we can step up and help ourselves out of this addiction to government funding and government service. Thanks.